The turning point for me was I switched schools when I was 13 and I had just entered secondary school. So it's like entering a whole new world. For example, instead of using pencils to write, use pens. But then I sort of felt like I had a group of friends at the end of the year and sort of, not to say found my place, who finds their place at 13 years old, but you sort of feel comfortable in the school. And then suddenly my parents were like, hey, you're going to change schools next year. I was like, huh? But I never heard of this school. I don't know anyone. I remember I even asked them, so what sort of uniform do I need to wear? They were like, don't know, you just go there and buy. Then I was like, what? Okay. So when I went to this new school, they didn't have any of the activities that I was previously participating in. This is History Garden. So I was in KDU before. In KDU, I was joining stuff like Scouts and I was in musicals and things like that. But in History Garden, they didn't have that. There was more sport focused and more, I guess, CCA focused. Then one day, someone came in and promoted this program called Model UN, and I never heard of it before. So I decided to give it a shot. To be honest, when I first entered it, I had no idea what I was doing. I just thought like, oh, okay, people are giving speeches, so it would be cool to learn how to give a speech. So I just went. The reason it sort of struck me in politics was because essentially it's about international diplomacy, right? It's simulating the UN. And a lot of people who do that also sort of do debate and are also interested in politics of the day. So by virtue of being in the community, I started to really, really understand how uninformed I was and how informed everyone else seemed to be. And when I spoke to my family about it and spoke to my granddad in particular about it, he suddenly put up. And he suddenly started explaining to me, oh yeah, you can do this, you can do that. Yeah, I've heard of this before. I've done this in real life before, and this is not how it works in real life. And I was surprised because as I was growing up, I didn't really fully understand what it meant for him to work in politics. He once sat me down and he told me like, Lincoln, this is okay to do for fun in school, but make sure you don't do it in real life. And I asked him, why? Why not? Then he said, just trust me, don't do it. Then I was like, okay. Then he was like, it's fun to do in real life, I know. It's fun to do in school, I know. But you don't go and try to do it in real life. Then I was like, okay. You study. Then I was like, okay. But yeah, so that was how it featured. It sort of stuck with me. So I do like to listen to news. And to be honest, in Malaysia, it's quite dramatic. So like it can be like watching a Netflix series kind of thing. So it is quite interesting.
So even from the age of 13, you were already starting to dabble in entrepreneurship. How did that even begin? And how did you lose your parents' money?
Right. This is something I don't talk about often. But so I think at that time, I don't really think I thought of it as entrepreneurship. I just thought of it like, oh, you read a lot of stories about other 13, 14-year-olds who make money. So why can't I be like them? But basically, my mom was working in estate planning and sales. She would read a lot of these books, about like how do you like leverage your network and how do you grow Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so there are a lot of these stories about all these people inside who take risks and stuff. And so I always thought about when I was young, like, oh yeah, I can try this too. I can try that too. I would think it's interesting. And I think funnily enough, at that time, I joined some multi-level marketing companies, which is before I talk about it, right, it's like very controversial, right? And there's a good reason why it's very controversial. But that being said, when it originally started, it's supposed to be like a legitimate business model. People who want to get cash fast make it unlegitimate. But it is actually very difficult to succeed in it, probably even more so than a normal business. But what happened is that, so I would start to dabble in all these sort of things. For some of the entrepreneurship opportunities that I joined, like the people that I spoke to, they seemed legitimate, and they were people who were significantly older than me, but they were 20, 30 years old. Actually, some people are our age now. They were making a sustainable income out of it. And when I brought my parents, because I was like, oh, hey, maybe I want to try doing it when I'm 14. And they were very, very shocked because we are already an outlier because we are like uni students who found a way to make it work, where a lot of other uni students have failed. Because multi-level organizations, you get like a lot of people joining very quickly and only some people succeed. And then here comes along this 14-year-old kid who wants to try what they thought they've already done when they're 21, 22, and that's like amazing. So I brought my parents, of course, to see whether it was like legit and stuff, because my parents are not just going to finance me without knowing it. They specifically told me like, okay, don't work with this guy, work with this person. This person seems more trustworthy, that kind of stuff. And so I went with that and I tried it. And the thing about entrepreneurship at that age, which I quickly realized, was that for me, life got in the way very quickly in terms of school. So it was very difficult. It actually did manage to get some sales, but very quickly, for example, when you face a challenge and then your exam comes up, after you finish your exam, you're not going to think about it because you're just going to remember the challenge. And then before I knew it, like 6 months would have passed or like a year would have passed. And that sort of became a norm throughout my, how do you say, like my high school life, where I tried to start something entrepreneurial. So a couple of years later, I tried starting a marketing company, doing advertisements, because I was really into filmmaking. And I remember I had a friend who was very good at drawing and storyboarding. I had a friend who was very good at filming, and I had a friend who was very good at video editing. So I was like, why don't I bring all of you together and then we just do something? And I remember it took us 3 months to try and get a contract from this random F&B shop. And when we finally did it, it was more of a relative that finally pushed us through. We suddenly had our exams. Like we had our like IGs, so like SPMs. It took out 3 months, and after a 3-month period, we were so exhausted from the exams. Everyone sort of like, by nature, we sort of forgot about it because we want to enjoy the end of our exams. And then after when we come back to it, like 6 months later, we're like, oh shit, it's been 6 months. And even the client is like, yeah, it's fine. Like, we don't really need it anymore. That sort of became a thing where I started to realize, okay, if I wanted to do something, I would have to do it consistently and not have something come in the way all the time to drag me out of it. Because at that time, you can't compromise on studies, right?
And then you also did this passive paper printing startup.
Yeah. So that was before I went to uni. So what happened, and it started very innocently. So at that time, my dad and granddad, they had health issues. They were both hospitalized for a few months. I was doing an internship in Singapore at the time. And so I stopped and I came back to KL and just followed them to the hospital. After they were both stabilized, they came back home, but they couldn't go out. I had this long period of just being at home. So I started to feel a bit bored. And then I met some of my friends who had also just finished college and were waiting for university or starting uni. And one of them came to me and he was like, hey, Lincoln, I have this brilliant business idea. I was like, okay, what's up? He was like, I have this friend who is a printing shop owner and he wants to break into the market. And I realized that when I was in college, every single student buys a book from the lecturer because the lecturer tells them, please buy your book from this guy. It's a textbook. And the thing about it is that the textbook is the same every year and the guy charges students like $25. But I know from my friend, because I took the book and I went to my friend, he says I can print it for 11. I was like, okay. Then my friend was like, so why don't we come in at like 18 and 19? All we have to do is just blend in. The students are not going to care. Like, they're just going to buy the book. So I was like, that's brilliant. But did you know that I have an even better way? Because when we were taking IGs or A levels or whatever, many of the times we would have to do past year papers to practice. And most of it we know is available online. But many people, if they are not so diligent to go and print online like every year, because they split it up by years, and so it's like a whole list of PDFs. What some of the shops do, which is quite ingenious, is that they will compile all the PDFs into like a subject and they'll print it out. So this will be like year 2002 all the way to year 2020, and it'll be like this thick ass book, and they'll sell it for like a couple of hundred, like 300, 400 ringgit. And the thing is that at that time, a few years ago, there was only like 1 or 2 shops in KL who were printing it. So you can only go there to buy those. Can you go find out the cost of that? And the cost of that is like 30, 40 ringgit. So instead of coming at 18 and the cost 11, you can come in at 200, right? Which is half the price of them. Then he was like, let me go home and do some calculations and then make sure it's correct. And he went home, came back, I was like, yeah. He was like, can I actually do this? And then I was like, tomorrow you want to go to our old school and speak to our teachers? And yeah, so then we started to go into schools. I remember the first time we pretended to be students in college because we were college age. We went to the school, we pretended to be students, and then we walked up to the school. I will not say the school's name. We walked up to the front of the class and be like, welcome to so-and-so class. By the way, guys, if you have a need for this book for your school, you can let us know. Call this number or like scan this QR code, something like that. And we'll let you know. And then walk out, and a few days later there would be people calling us, there would be people messaging us saying like, oh hey, yeah, do you have this book? And I remember there was one time the person that supposed to be collaborating with the lecturer, I guess, to say was sitting there, and then one student came up to me, and this was actually quite bad, but they were like, oh, but the person is selling it for like 18 as well, like what's the difference? And I was like, oh, okay, then I'll give it to you guys for 17. I just said it very nonchalantly, and then suddenly as I walked out, a lot of people started following me, and then they were like, oh hey, the guy said that you're going to give it for 17. I was like, maybe a ringgit difference. And then I was like, okay, but sure, like here you guys go, like here are the copies of the textbook. And then my friend came back, I was like, wait, what happened? Then I was like, oh, I told them I'll give it to them at 17. I was like, why? And then like, because the other guy is giving it 18. Then I was like, oh, that's brilliant. But yeah, so it was a very fun, I guess, project that we did before we went to uni.
Given all the things that you were doing, why was it that you ended up doing biomedical sciences?
That was why I said it's after college, before uni, so applications passed. But I think the main reason why I chose biomed was I am definitely afraid of blood. but I was very interested in medical sciences. So I can't be a doctor. I can't be the Asian dream because I would freeze and threaten the patient's life. And so I decided that I wanted to study something in the medical sciences that didn't require me to be exposed to blood on a daily basis. I settled on biomedical science because it was pitched to me as everything a doctor does except the operations. And I was like, okay, that sounds interesting.
So before you went and did it, you did another big activity after IBM, which was to organize a Pokemon walkathon.
So Pokemon Go was like all the rage, right? When it came out in, I think, August 2016. And at that time, our printing project was ramping up. So it was still the same team, but we were always discussing ways of like, what else can we do? Because it's fun. We like to work together. And we were all sort of free at the time. So we were like, we have this gap. What should we do? And one day, as we were playing Pokemon Go, basically, one guy was like, hey, what if someone did a walkathon of it? And we all just sort of like, whoa, actually, that's a really, really good idea. How would we do that? And we basically decided that we needed a lot of partners. And so we basically went to explore. Like, if you want to organize a walkathon like that, what do you need? And the thing we realized was Pokemon Go was only going to be a rage for like a month or two, right? And it was going to die down. So you needed to organize it within that time frame, which is like nearly impossible, right? How are 4 kids going to organize a walkathon in the span of 2 weeks? The thing was that getting the people on board was the easy part. People would just join. If you create a Facebook group and stuff, we had like 12,000 followers, that kind of thing. But getting it done in real life, now that's the difficult part. And that was actually the first time I got exposed to social entrepreneurship, which is very innocently enough. We needed to collaborate with someone who's very good at bringing people together, right? Bringing partnerships together. And we approached it more from an event management perspective than a social entrepreneurship perspective. But that exposed me to it. And then later, what we got exposed to was like, okay, there's a lot of legal loopholes you need to run through. That started us off on this crazy journey as 3 18, 19-year-old kids trying to navigate and apply for licenses that we had no idea existed, that we only heard about in the news, that politicians fail to get when they try to protest, the Versailles fails to get it or something. We had to like navigate and it was interesting exposure to civil service as well, to understand how to like sort of read between the lines sometimes and to understand what makes them tick. How do you even fill up the application form, which is like 10 pages long? Who do you even submit it to? How do you expedite it? Because like it's probably gonna be in someone's desk forever. And then once you finish, who else do you talk to? Who's gonna like protect the people as they walk on the street? Where do they go? I remember we walked through the streets of Bukit Bintang at like 2 a.m. in the middle of the night trying to finalize, okay, if they go here, but look, there's a fence there. And even though we put do not touch this fence, someone's gonna touch this fence. And then like we're going to have to deal with it if they get injured. And then like, okay, how do you have an ambulance on standby? And then how do they walk through the malls? And then some malls actually contacted us when they heard we were going to do this, which was very interesting, like going to meet some of the people, like so young, right? And I think they were shocked. Why are they like 3 kids walking in, meeting us? Like when they are like trying to discuss, like, hey, can you walk us through? Maybe we can offer a discount at like certain stores to like get people to have heavier footfall in our malls. And unfortunately, at the end, we couldn't pull it off. It was just too big of a challenge. We actually met someone else who wanted to maybe take it on, but maybe move it away to another location and was more experienced, like a businessman who's done this before. But then we were about to go to university, so we decided, okay, maybe it's not it's not the best time to try to start something 2 weeks before you're supposed to fly off to uni, because you might have to delay a month of your university if we do it together. And yeah, and interesting exposure into the whole world of civil society, civil service. And for me, my first exposure to social entrepreneurship.
You went to UCF, and I think it was your second year when you realized that life sciences wasn't quite for you and you wanted to switch to entrepreneurship. Why was that? Why was that switch?
I think that even before university, I realized entrepreneurship was quite fun, right? Doing all this. And then in the first year of university, I realized that all my friends were going on internships, right? So they're working at all the big banks, consulting, investment banking, things like that. And I don't know why, I just didn't feel like I would fit in. So I didn't really bother applying. But after a certain point, you sort of feel like FOMO. So I started going to a couple of events to like try and see if I could get a job, get an internship. And I met one of our, so like in the UK, you have like your Malaysian societies. I met one of the president there, and he was like, what are you doing here? I thought you participated in some of the clubs which are supposed to like get you these kind of internships anyway. It should be easy for you to get it. And I told him, well, to be honest, I don't really know whether I want. And then he told me, well, why don't you try a startup? I have a couple of people who have reached out to me and I know them personally, and it will be quite fun. It will definitely be something that you won't get anywhere else. So I was like, okay, let me try it. So I ended up at a startup, Smart Build Asia. And I think that was the first proper exposure into a startup because what they did was business intelligence in the construction industry. So it was a lot of collecting data, crunching the data, and then pushing it out to clients, a lot of tech, and also seeing a lot of the business development side, the non-tech business development side of a tech company. It was pretty funny because apparently I was never supposed to be an intern. There was a bit of miscommunication in the beginning because they only hired tech interns. I was the first person that they hired for a non-tech role. And what happened was that the company was based in Singapore and they were expanding to Malaysia. And the reason a role opened up was because in Malaysia, the data was not as easily obtainable as in Singapore. So in Singapore, you can get it from a lot of web resources, but in Malaysia, some of it still had to be, you can't just scrape it from the web, you need to obtain it from basically like construction sites or like billboards. So I was basically brought in and the task was like, okay, basically you have to collect all this data and process it, but you take care of all the non-tech related ones, so the ones that you cannot find on the web. Also, I was like, how do I do that? Like at one point they were like, you need to know what that construction project is happening before they break ground. I was like, how? And then it's not going to appear on the internet. How am I supposed to know? I sneak into the boardrooms, is it? And so that gave me a first exposure because then every day I'll be working with my counterparts who are the tech side, understanding what the process they implemented it and seeing how can I replicate that in real life, but without using tech because it's not available on the web. Ended up having to like coordinate tons and tons and tons of riders. They are mostly freelancers. So I would coordinate hundreds and hundreds of them and I would like take the information I get from the web and process it into potential like high value sites and ask them to go and speak to the people there. So there are like techniques that you can explain to them to get them to be more chill. I mean, it's sometimes pretty well known when people will speak to them because you don't need to speak to the manager. You can just speak to the guards there who would know like, oh yeah, this company comes. You can see the trucks painted on the side of the name and all these kind of stuff you can see. And in Malaysia, there's a board that you have to put for all the lists and things like that. So all these sort of things taught me business development and it exposed me to this culture of startups. And that's when in the second year, I decided, okay, maybe I want to explore this properly. So what I then began to basically study everything I could about entrepreneurship. I signed up for courses, I signed up for like programs and everything in my second year.
I suppose you were not just signing up for all these courses, you were also telling people as well, like Kisem, who was in the same hall as you. How did you guys end up applying for the HULT Prize?
So it's quite coincidental because me and Kisem, we felt that we connected because we both were in life sciences. Even if we were to work in life sciences, we were more interested in the business aspect of it. So like pharmaceutical sales, and we wanted to help each other succeed. So we had these sessions where second year is like the proper internship. That's the culture in studying overseas. So we will basically meet each other every week to try and help each other apply. Because we thought like, okay, maybe if we apply together, if we practice together, if we look through each other's things and we're applying to roughly the same places, our chances of success would increase. So it started off with like like these kind of sessions. And then one day, he was the president of the Life Sciences Club. So the HULT Prize campus director at UCL was trying to promote HULT Prize since it was the first year that HULT Prize came to UCL.
This is Masha Semkova.
Yeah, Masha. So Masha was also someone who lived in our hall in the previous year. So she knew Kisem and she asked Kisem to promote it. And he was like, he had like a lot of posts scheduled or something like that. So he was like, okay. And then one day, I think she asked him while I was there with him. So it was like, oh, right, dude, have you heard of this thing? And surprisingly enough, one of my friends was actually part of a committee as well. So I had seen it on like Instagram and social media. And so I was like, yeah, I sort of seen it, but I don't really know what's about. And then so I remember he said, okay, let's click into it. And then he clicked into it. And then like the website came up and like you see Bill Clinton's face there. And then he was like, oh, this looks cool. Then I was like, wow, they get $1 million. And then we were like, oh, it's social entrepreneurship. Then I was like, oh, right. Yeah, my friend told me about this once. It's like business plus charity, somewhere in between. And then at that time, that was my understanding. And then he was like, oh, okay. And then he was like, hey, you want to join? It would be good for our CV to apply to, internships. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And we left it at that. And then like, I think a couple of weeks later, I was taking a nap and he called me and he was like, let's go for the HULT Prize talk right now. And I was like, why? Because I live like 25 minutes away from university. So I was like, oh, it's cold, it's raining. Kisem, why do I have to go there now? And then he was like, dude, just come. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Like, I'll save you a spot. Like, just come there quickly. And I was like, okay, fine. So I went there and we listened to the presentation and we were like, this actually sounds like quite exciting. It sounds very, very low chance like that we would even get to the next round. But why not, right? Like, what do we have to lose, right? Me and Kisem, this is the mindset I had. I heard Kisem won quite a bit of competition before, so maybe if I join with him, he'll win. A few months later, he told me that he had thought the same thing about me. So But so it all turned out well. But yeah, so that's how we started off. Innocently enough, we just sort of like, hey, let's just try and explore it. And that's how we started.
I mean, to put it in context, the HULT Prize is quite a huge thing, right? It's the world's largest startup challenge for student entrepreneurs. And you said there were very low chance you were competing against 200,000 other students around the world for $1 million. So very, very, very exceptionally low chances. I think there was someone who said you have a higher chance of
winning the lottery.
Winning the lottery than the HULT Prize. That's amazing. For your particular year, the official challenge was build a scalable, sustainable social enterprise that harnesses the power of energy to transform the lives of 10 million people by 2025. That's very, very ambitious and also very broad. So how did you begin to think about that question and build a team around it?
So we began by building a team around it, and we decided that because most of our teams were from our friends and from Southeast Asia, we wanted to do something in Southeast Asia. And so we did what a lot of teams do in that situation, which is we started throwing out ideas, which ones we like, which ones we don't like. And we would spend days on ends arguing about it. Not arguing so much, but like you can't really find the one that fits. It's just sort of like, okay, this feels right. And we didn't really find something that fit. We had like a lot of interesting ideas like vertical farming, urban farming, solar powered lamp posts, composting, things like this, solar powered machinery, but nothing really stuck. It was only when we decided maybe let's just scrap this, right? Let's just look for an issue that we can solve instead. And that was actually really powerful. We never really understood. We sort of made that decision, but never really fully understood what sort of decision we're making, where we were actually telling ourselves, let's look for a problem instead of searching for an idea. And that's actually much more better, because if you look for a problem, you know that the problem is grounded in reality. Your ideas can change, but the problem, if it's properly a problem, it won't change because it's still there. So it becomes like something easy to base your enterprise around. And we went to search for a problem, right? And HULT Prize had like this huge challenge document that detailed like 6 key areas, and one of them was agriculture. And so as we were like researching, I still remember like it was like at some dormitory common area, and we were all like on our laptops. It was like 2 a.m. when I was like reading about agriculture. This article popped up in Southeast Asia, and when they said like 80% of rice is wasted before it gets to plate. And I was like, what? No, that's impossible. Like, this is a fake article. We later found out it was fake, but I was like, how can this be? And then I sort of like turned it around. And I'm like, guys, look at this. And Kisung was like, huh? No, like he was like, I eat rice every day. How can this happen? Like, you know, as Asians, we do eat rice every day. So how can 80% of rice be wasted before it gets to plate, right? And later on, we found out the number is much lower. It's closer to 30%, but that's still significant. Up to 30% of it can be wasted. Why does it happen? And that sort of sparked that eureka moment. And I think that's sort of when you know you're on the right track. You got to look for these moments where there's a reason why you feel shocked about it. So dig into that, dig into your shock. And that's what we did. We tried to find out what was this problem? Why did it happen? What was causing it? And then we realized that actually we had stumbled upon something we can actually develop into a viable business for the HULT Prize for our presentation that was coming up in a week. And we also realized that suddenly 10 million people was achievable, because think about how many people eat it every day. And it definitely sort of sparked off like this journey. Innocently enough, it honestly just started off by like, okay, let's find out why was it a problem.
So what was the problem?
So the problem was that we first realized there's a lot of problems, and it's all interrelated. You cannot just click one and think that everything else goes away. But mainly the problems come from the market conditions with which 70% of the world's rice is grown, right? 70 to 80% of it is still grown by smallholder rice farmers. And it's the circumstances and the conditions surrounding their, I guess, communities and livelihood and their way of life that is the thing causing a lot of this to happen. And it's not just causing waste to happen, right? Waste was how we entered into the ecosystem. We realized this was a problem. You also have poverty. You also have malnutrition. You have food security. You have climate change as well. Rice is a leading emitting factor of methane. So you have all these problems, and like the main problems that we at that time we wanted to tackle was we realized that, okay, a lot of the waste happens because smallholder farmers, they don't have access to proper agriculture technologies because they're poor. They can't afford it. The technologies are out there, but they don't have access to it. So what is the technology that we could implement quickly that would have a large impact? And we found that, okay, in the supply chain, after harvesting, many people have already worked on harvesting. You know, you have tractors and all these kind of things. The next stage was drying, and many of them still sun-dried. And this actually causes a lot of the waste to happen in the drying process, but more so downstream when you start to mill it and transport it. So we were like, okay, how do professional companies dry it? And we realized that there's actually a lot of technology out there and innovations out there that was not getting into the hands of the farmers. So then we decided, can we be the person that brings it to the farmers? Just by innovating the business model of the technology itself. Which technology should we use? Can we pair it up with the region and the needs of the farmers specifically in a way that they can access it in a way that's affordable? So it was a lot of business model innovation in the beginning, not really so much tech innovation. And that honestly formed the first basis of our idea, where we were like, okay, can we get like an off-the-shelf technology, open source technology, and adapt it for a region we choose needs and make it accessible to the farmers, the people who need it.
So at the time when you were first tackling this problem and you realized that this drying issue was something that smallholder farmers were facing, I imagine this is a problem that farmers all over the world would face wherever they are planting this rice. So how do you decide on focusing initially on just Vietnam?
So we initially decided on Vietnam because Kisung was from Vietnam. No, I'm kidding. He's not from Vietnam. He
Then I
studied
will
in
ask
Vietnam.
I will ask, why do you not focus on Malaysia?
Right. Got it. I'll answer both. So we initially focused on Vietnam simply because when we were doing our research, we realized that the Mekong Delta was sort of like the rice bowl of the region. Like that's where a lot of the rice came from, and a large portion of it was in Vietnam. The logic was we should go where there's the densest concentration of the farmers. And we based our research on that initially. And why we weren't in Malaysia in the beginning was that we actually did try. So later on, we actually did explore fields in Malaysia. We actually spoke to farmers in Malaysia. But I think what we soon realized was that in Southeast Asia, each country's rice industry is unique and it has its unique challenges. So the problems that we were projecting onto, or like the problems that we were designing our model to tackle, might not have been suitable in certain countries. Because in certain countries, for example in Malaysia, farmers don't need to dry their rice because they already sell it wet, and there's someone who will dry it for them already. The farmers have not like sun-dried or dried their rice personally, at least majority of the farmers in Malaysia, for I guess the past like 20, 30 years. It'll be more difficult for us to ask them to restart doing it again, and for us to dislodge the incumbent, because that doesn't make sense. And it's same for Vietnam. So we quickly realized that the technology we wanted to bring was actually already accessible to the farmers there. The farmers had gotten to a point where they were willing to take the investment, and the manufacturers of technology had gotten the barriers low enough that a lot of farmers could access it. Then we decided that we don't need to go into Vietnam, or we can't go into Malaysia.